Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for joining me again. So I'm sure you've heard of this tune. Body and Soul is one of those jazz standards that everyone learns at some point, and for good reason. There's so many iconic versions out there, from Louis Armstrong to Coleman Hawkins and Billie Holiday. And it's worth checking out as many versions as you can, just so you can get a really good, well-rounded view of how this piece sounds. So as with all of my chord melody lessons, the first thing we're going to do is strip this right back to the basic changes and the basic melody. And then we're going to look at how we can combine those two things with a ton of other elements, things that are authentic and vintage inspired jazz maneuvers, chord voicings, chord substitutions, and little fills here and there. As with all of my lessons, you can get the neatly typed out tab and notation for this at the links in the description. And as well as the note for note tab of my arrangement, I'll also include a basic chord chart. Okay, so we're in the key of D flat major for this, and the chord progression for the A section goes like this. E flat minor 7, B flat 7, E flat minor 7, A flat 7, D flat major 7, G flat 7, F minor 7, E diminished 7, E flat minor 7, C minor 7 flat 5 to F7, B flat minor 7, and then a quick change back to the D flat, and then the B flat 7 is the turnaround chord. So just to go over the quick change in bar number 7, we had this: B flat minor 7, E flat minor 7, A flat 7, then resolving to the D flat major. Okay, so I've put those basic changes in the looper, and now I'm going to demonstrate the melody that sits on top of them. So a very pretty melody. Now let's look at how we put those things together and make a chord melody arrangement. So the simple way we can look at this is that we need the chord E flat minor 7 to start. So let's grab this 3-note voicing as our foundation, always a good place to start, and think about how the melody could sit on top of that chord. Here it is. So all we have to do is form this voicing. I like to think of it in those ways, like two lanes of traffic, the chords and the melody, and combine the two things. Move the melody around a little bit. Now for the next chord we're going to use a substitution. Instead of playing B flat 7, we're going to play D diminished 7 to give us the sound of a B flat 7 with a flat 9. Very common extension. In fact, in the real book, you'll see that the chord they ask for here is the B flat 7 flat 9. And this gives us everything we need, aside from the root. So you've got the third, the flat 7, the flat 9, and the fifth. And that fifth happens to also be the melody. So it's a win-win. And then E flat minor 7 again, where the melody now is this B flat note, and the voicing that can serve as everything we need there is this simple E flat minor 7 voicing off the A shape. Now we're going to use another substitution. Instead of going to A flat 7, we're going to play the tritone sub of that. I do have a lesson on tritone subs, so watch that if you're not sure how they work. But in short, just take your dominant chord, in this case A flat 7, and replace the root with the note a tritone away. Whether you go down or up, you're going to get to the same note. So 3 whole tones up from A flat is D. And just to prove the point, 3 whole tones down from A flat is D. It's the midway point. So we take the A flat 7, swap the root to a D, keep the other 2 notes the same, and now you've got yourself a D7 chord. We're going to extend it further, put the 9 in there, and then also bring that ringing melody note back into play, the B flat on the top string. And just give it a gentle strum. It resolves beautifully to D flat for the next part of the melody, where we're opting for a D flat 6-9 chord. Again, just think about things in 2 lanes of traffic. You've got your chord first of all. You could use any kind of flavour of D flat major that you like there. And in fact, later on we switch it out for a major 7, just for a bit of variety. But you want to be thinking major 7, major 9, 6-9, 6, just a plain major with a spread triad, D flat major there, D flat 6 there. All of those options just surrounding that one area, and dig into all of them. Major 13 as well, of course. So what we go for in the end there is D flat 6-9. The melody moves around on the top string, and then we need some kind of G flat 7. We're going to go with a slightly fancy option here. Instead of just a plain G flat 7, where the melody is the third of the chord, so that would look like this. We're going to take that fifth and flatten it, just to give it a bit more of that kind of authentic 40s jazz vibe. Melody drops down a whole tone, and then we need F minor 7, where the melody note is all the way up here on this E flat. Again, this very common voicing can do the job for us. And then we need the melody to drop down a whole tone, so we're going to form this partial. This is kind of what you call a quartal chord, kind of a Jim Hall or Bill Frisell kind of vibe. I love that slightly dissonant sound you get when you form a chord in fourths. And that's kind of what we're doing here. It's like an F minor, but with a sharpened fifth. And then we have this chord. So this is an E diminished 7th. It's also 3 other things, of course, but we're going to think of it as E diminished 7 because that's what the chord was at this point in the progression. And the melody does this sweet little manoeuvre. So now you've got this F minor, quartal voicing, E diminished. Now we're back to E flat minor 7, where the melody uses notes from the minor 7 arpeggio, the flat 7, the 5th, the minor 3rd, and then skipping the root and coming down to the 5th. We can do all of that with that basic shape in place. And then we need a C minor 7 flat 5, where this is the basic shape that you're going to be used to seeing for that. The only problem is our melody is here, the 11 of that chord. So we're going to take a caveman-like approach, which always works with this stuff. Grab what you can from that shape and just change what needs to be changed. And now you've got yourself a fancy chord, a C minor 11 flat 5. And then the next melody note is here, and the chord goes to F7. And we're going to grab this interesting voicing. Doesn't look much like an F7, does it really? Until you look a little closer. Take the B bass note away, and you've got an F7 here, hiding within, the root, the 3rd, and the flat 7. This B bass note is our flat 5, so again it's tritone sub territory, that. Beautiful voicing. So you could think of this as both F7 flat 5 or B7 flat 5. It's the same thing either way. Interesting. And then that resolves down to a B flat minor 7, where the melody is going to do this. So again, we can just maintain as much of the chord as we can while we travel around through the melody. Then we need E flat minor 7, with this melody note on top. So we're going to go for this voicing, E flat minor 11. Again, you can see this simply as an E flat minor 7, where the top note had to be moved up to accommodate the melody. And then we do this interesting chord. We need A flat 7, and the melody's going to do this slightly dissonant kind of bluesy thing. So we can incorporate that sneakily into the chord by thinking A flat 7 with a sharpened 5th, and then resolve to D flat major 6, where the melody note is the D flat that sits on top. Now, because we're about to go back and do the A section again, we need a turnaround here, and quite simply, that's a case of chucking the 5 in of wherever you're going next. So where do we need to get back to? We need E flat minor 7 to kick off the next A section. What's the 5 of that? B flat 7. So we need some kind of B flat 7 chord here. And like we did in bar number 1 of our chord melody, we're going to think B flat 7 with a flat 9. And to get that, we're going to play D diminished 7, only this time instead of that voicing, we're going to use another favourite voicing of mine. These are often referred to as shearing voicings, named after the piano player George Shearing. And it works well coming from the D flat 6 here, because you can keep your hand nice and close and just augment what needs augmenting. And you've got this. You've got the D, the F, the B, and then the D again. And then I'm going to invert that diminished chord the good old lazy way, just drag it 3 frets higher. And it's going to be the same 4 notes, but they're going to switch positions. And then we're back to the beginning to start A2, where basically it's going to be the same again, just with a couple of very small adaptations, maybe things like this, for example. Instead of playing D9 sharp 5 here, well, we're still playing it here, but I'm also going to include the 5th in the bass by barring those bottom 2 strings with the tip of the finger. You could use your thumb if you prefer. Bit more of a stretch, but you know, that's the good old Barney Kessel way of doing things. It seems subtle, right? But it does add a lot of depth to the chord, and for me it makes it one step more authentic and more true to the era. And then just like before, D flat 6 9, G flat dominant, F minor rundown, the E diminished, E flat minor 7. And then here I think I did something a little different. I went C minor 7 flat 5 and then to this deep, rich F7 voicing, which I love. The root, the 5th, kill the D string, major 3rd, flat 7. Make sure that you're always thinking of tone. You know, I talk about this a lot, but tone can have a journey as well as the note choice and the chord choice. You want your tone to go from small to big sometimes and just gradually grow and get richer and richer as the song progresses. And that can be a simple way of doing it. Taking a chord that was voiced a bit more midish and making it a bit more lowish. Hopefully you get what I mean. And then we have the sign-off phrase again. Now instead of a turnaround, because we need to get to the B section, and the B section is going to begin on a D major chord, we're going to play a 2-5 approaching that chord. So we think, okay, in the key of D, what's the 2? E minor 7. Okay, what's the 5? A7. So we need some kind of 2-5 type of idea. Now what I went for is this type of thing, where essentially we've got a G major triad with an A in the bass. Now that G major triad could be seen as a portion of your E minor 7 chord, of course, because you've got your flat 3, your 5th and your flat 7. The A is a little suspension that, you know, it's the root of the next chord, the 5 chord. And to get to that 5 chord, you can just simply drop the top note a semitone, which gives you an A9, or you can drop the top note and the middle note a semitone down to get A7 flat 9, and I believe that's what I did. Either way, it works beautifully. The idea being that it takes us to a D major chord in a really elegant way. Okay, so speaking of the B section, let's get into the basic changes for that, and then the melody, and then we'll look at putting them together again. And I'm going to do this slowly because there's a lot of changes, and I'm no rapper. D major 7, E minor 7, D major first inversion, G minor 7 to C7, F sharp minor 7 to B minor 7, E minor 7 to A7, D major 7. And then D minor 7 to G7, C major 7, E flat diminished 7, D minor 7, G7, and then this interesting rundown, C7, B7, B flat 7, which of course is the 5 chord of E flat minor, and E flat minor is where we go next, because then we'd be starting the final A section, A3 we can call it. So like I said, a lot of changes in there. Now I've put that in the looper, and again I'm going to just demonstrate the basic melody on top of that. So much more movement this time round, and we're going to start with this. So that's a D major chord, nice and simple, C shape, open E string, 2nd fret, and then E minor 7 with the A note in the melody, which gives us E minor 11, and then we're going to move all the way up to this D note up here while we form the D major 1st inversion underneath. So that's simply a D major triad, 3rd in the bass, easy way to look at it. And then the melody is the additional little cherry on top. And then the B string, and then G minor 9, because we needed a G minor 7 with this A note in the melody. Thus G minor 9 is the end result. And then C7, where the melody is already part of your chord. And you can play this with the thumb over, or by barring, whatever you prefer. Of course, if you're doing fingerstyle, you can bar and not worry about that A string. If you were going to strum, you could just fill in this 5th here, so you didn't end up with this muddy sound. Timing wise, pay attention to the on-beat and off-beat kind of thing that's going on there. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and then we continue that kind of theme. F sharp minor 7, B minor 7, E minor 7, A7, and then to this heavy low D major voicing. There's your 2nd inversion triad, and there's the melody, the A note. And again, it's useful there to bar the entire 7th fret and then move the whole thing down. And then you're doing very little movement between the changes. But again, it gives you more of that kind of flow. Then we need a D minor chord with this melody. So we're going to grab one of these low voicings again, just like I used in my My Funny Valentine chord melody for C minor. Same melody as well, coincidentally there. That's a 1, 2, flat 3 kind of melody. I always talk about 1, 2, 3, 5 and how melodic it is, so it's no surprise that it crops up in many places. So D minor, so here we've got the root, the flat 3, the 5 and the root again, and barring the 7th fret. And then we're going to move along and form this G9 chord. So a G7, with the A melody note. Always be really careful with your fingering here and make sure that you're playing things tidily. It's hard to do. You want to retain as much of this ringing chord as possible, so you don't really want to move this bass note away prematurely. And you've got to neatly try and sweep up behind the active fingers with anything you can to dampen the unwanted open strings and weird overtones you might be hearing. Then the melody moves, and then we have C major 7, and then a really pretty thing here, there's your C diminished 7 or E flat diminished 7. On the chord chart for this, people always put it as an E flat diminished 7, but I like to think of it as a C diminished 7. For me, it simplifies the thinking. Instead of thinking 1 flat 3 diminished to the 2, I just like to think 1 diminished to the 2. Much easier to think about when you're trying to find lines to play. So take your C diminished 7 on the top 4 strings with the root on top, move that melody a whole tone higher. Same kind of voicing we had earlier, isn't it, on the E diminished 7. Okay, now this time we're going to invert the whole thing down and go to a plain diminished 7th again, where again you could be seeing the root here if you're thinking C diminished on the G string 5th fret there. And again, move gracefully. And then get into this D minor 7 chord. Simple shape again, just like a plain D minor 7 with the flat 7 doubled. And then we need a G7. We're going to go really standard here, just a G7 voicing on the top 4 strings, not even an inversion, just a root position dominant 7. And then, to find the melody and still retain G7, we're going to come down to G7 sharp 5. Sharp 5 is always a good tension to add into a dominant chord, especially when it's resolving to a chord with a major third in it, because you get this lovely little leading tone. And then we go to C7, B7, B flat 7, and then we need another interesting dominant chord, so we do the same thing we did on the G7 sharp 5 here, but for B flat 7. So you've got C7, B7, B flat 7, B flat 7 sharp 5. Okay, and then that's the end of the B section. Now we need the final A section. That chord resolves us beautifully back to the E flat minor 7. All the same again to begin with. No, in fact I went this time. So instead of a D flat 6, 9, I went with a D flat major 7. I love this voicing. It's just your plain voicing that you're probably used to seeing off the low E string, but built off the A string instead. And then instead of a G flat 7 with that spicy flat 5, we just go to a plain G flat 7 this time, just to keep things varied, keep it fresh, and to keep you guys on your toes, of course. And then that little rundown from before, F minor stuff, quartal voicing. I threw in a simple little passing note here. Immediately makes it sound 1920s, 1930s to me, kind of like Alan Royce. And then like before, what do we need? E flat minor 7, C minor 7 flat 5, to that fat F7, and then the main hook. And then I stole an ending here off Django. He's always a great source of inspiration for intros and endings and fills. I can't remember exactly which piece this came from, but I think he did it on a few tunes. You've got the 4 minor, so G flat minor 6, and then this is an interesting chord. This is like an A7, where the flat 7's in the bass, and then D flat major 6 with the 5th in the bass. And there we have it, a full chord melody for body and soul. Now technique-wise, it is very important, like I said, to be very clean and accurate with your fingering and your picking in the right hand. Of course, you could play all of this with a plectrum, that would be great as well. It works great either way. Using a plectrum, for me, makes me somehow want to play with more of a steady beat to it, rather than that more loose tempo feel like we did with the fingerstyle approach. But totally explore and play around with this stuff. Another thing to think about is that you always want the melody note to really pop. Don't let it get so buried in a chord that you lose the sound of it. So sometimes that means picking it harder than the other notes. Try and make it sit on top somehow. Maybe not as much as that. But you get the point. Make sure the melody note doesn't get too disguised. Okay, so for gear talk, very simple. This is my 1958 ES175. I was on the neck pickup the whole time with everything turned all the way up. And this was running straight into my Lazy J20 amp, and I added the smallest amount of room reverb in Logic Pro afterwards. Barely anything though. The strings are Tomastic flat wound 12 gauge. They're swing strings, they call them. They're really nice. Suit this guitar perfectly. If you're a fan of this sort of chord melody playing, then do check out players like Barney Kessel, Jim Hall, Herb Ellis, Tal Farlow, Johnny Smith. Those guys really were the masters of all of this stuff, and I'm just really borrowing from those places. Okay guys, so thanks for joining me. Make sure you do check out the Patreon page for hundreds and hundreds of lessons. Some great stuff on there, not just jazz chord melodies, but a lot of blues, country and folk stuff as well. Oh, and please do make sure that you're subscribed to this channel and that you hit the like button and leave a comment. Ask any questions you might have. Alright guys, take care, see you next time. Cheers.